from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, pulling back the curtain on mental health on the farm.
And it wasn't until after that happened that I realized how important it was and that we really should have had a lot of stronger, different conversations than what we had been having.
The warning signs everyone needs to look out for. Another country has plans to ban glyphosate, and team coverage as Hurricane Dorian continues to spin dangerously close to the East Coast.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Hurricane Dorian is continuing her march up the East Coast with attention now turned to what the storm will do to the Carolinas. The slow-moving storm sparing South Florida, but the outer bands brought heavy rain to eastern Florida and southeast Georgia. Beach erosion has been reported in Florida from the pounding waves. The situation in the Bahamas is described as utter destruction, where the full scope of the disaster is unknown. A Red Cross spokesman estimates more than 13,000 houses, or about 45% of the homes in Grand Bahamas or Abaco alone, were believed to have been severely damaged or destroyed. Dorian is the most powerful storm on record to ever hit the islands. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen kicks off her team coverage. Cindy, this storm continues to bring damaging winds and flooding with it, even if the storm doesn't make landfall in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely, Clinton. And yeah, you're right. The damaging winds, even if the eye stays offshore, the coast especially is going to be battered with potentially 100+ mile-per-hour winds or close to it. So this is going to be devastating from the wind standpoint, but also the amount of water. You got storm surge, but then you also have a lot of rain coming down. Take a look at this map here. Now, this is just an estimate. This is just a model, one of many models that we look at. But look at how much rain it is actually showing. We're seeing many of these places well over 6 inches of rain, and I think this is going to be on the low side, folks. I think we're going to be seeing some areas that are going to be seeing 10 inches of rain. That would be my guess, and it depends on the model you look at. Some of them are showing that high, but you can see how the eastern parts of the Carolinas, especially the coastal areas, are going to be inundated with the rainfall, and add the strong winds, storm surge, all of that on top of it. It is not good news for anybody out in the Carolinas, especially for our producers. Let's take a look at our wind speed forecast as we head through the day today, and this is what we have to look forward to. Obviously, Dorian is going to be the area to watch in the southeast. That's where we're going to see the strongest winds. Our legend only goes up to 25+, so it's obviously going to be higher than that along the coast. Other areas to watch: upper Midwest, there's going to be just a little breezy today. There's going to be pockets of windy conditions out in the west as well. Overnight, obviously, Dorian's going to be the place to really watch along into the mid-Atlantic coast, and through the day on Friday, we'll continue to watch the eastern seaboard, but we will see some pockets of windier conditions in the nation's midsection as well. I'll have your national forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Clinton?
North Carolina's Agriculture Department is warning producers to move livestock and poultry out of harm's way ahead of the storm. The state is temporarily suspending trucking limits for transporting ag products. Continuing our coverage of this massive storm is Linda Loveland of the North Carolina Farm Bureau. Linda, she's joining us from Beulahville, a little bit inland from the coast. Linda, farmers there are very concerned about the storm.
They're very concerned, especially after the losses they suffered last year. The warm tropical air has already made its way in here to eastern North Carolina, a warning of things to come. Farmers are working around the clock to get prepared for Hurricane Dorian. Tobacco farmers, big crop in eastern North Carolina, trying to harvest just as many leaves as they possibly can. Also making sure their generators are ready to go to back up those the dryers in the tobacco barns. Hay farmers getting the last few bales out of the field and under shelter. Corn farmers here, it's a big crop here in eastern North Carolina as well. They're working around the clock, bringing as many people as they can to harvest these last hundreds of acres of corn to get them in time before they're laid flat. Livestock poultry farmers, they're bringing in extra feed to make sure they're prepared. Also checking to make sure those lagoon levels are low, ready for that extra rainfall coming in. But overall, once everything is secure on the farm, then at that point they go back to their homes and make sure that's secure. But farmers here are still recovering after the horrible losses from last year, and another hit like last year could be devastating. For AgDay TV, I'm Linda Loveland.
All right, thank you, Linda. Linda Loveland with the North Carolina Farm Bureau. A new crop progress report from USDA is showing there's been some improvement for the corn crop. 58% is now rated good to excellent. That's 1% better than the previous week. As for soybeans, 55% is reported good to excellent. That's the same as the week before. The spring wheat harvest, it's rolling on. It's now estimated at 55% harvested. Usually it's around 78% this time of year. We brought you a week of coverage from the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour along with yield numbers. Now Allendale, a Chicago-based ag brokerage firm, releasing its own yield survey estimates. The firm pegging its 2019 survey yield for corn at 167 bushels to the acre with a soybean yield of 46 bushels to the acre. Those are both lower than USDA's August crop production report. For production, Allendale corn estimate is at 13.75 billion bushels, with soybean production at 3.49 billion bushels. Both of those numbers are slightly below USDA's findings. Chief Strategist Rich Nelson breaks down the differences.
Stood out, looks like South Dakota, we found 11 bushels lower than USDA, North Dakota 5 bushels lower than USDA, and on the eastern corn belt side, Ohio 6 bushels lower than USDA. The main states, though, as far as numbers on corn, came in relatively close to USDA, Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois.
Trade wars, commodity prices, the weather, all causing an emotional roller coaster ride for farmers these days. And as Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan reports, it's sparking some serious conversations about mental health during Suicide Prevention Awareness Month.
Katie Lyons grew up on an Illinois farm, a life full of so much joy thanks to special memories of her dad.
When I was younger, he was always out playing with us in the yard, having fun, and I try to hold those memories close because that's all I've got left.
Clenching onto pictures and memories after the unthinkable changed their family forever.
My dad decided to take his life in 2013 after a long bout of depression and anxiety on the farm.
That moment, that day, and that year took Katie's life on a sharp turn, knowing she had to make good out of so much heartache.
And it wasn't until after that happened that I realized how important it was and that we really should have had a lot of stronger, different conversations than what we had been having.
Farmers are some of the best caregivers in the world. They care for crops, they care for land, they care for their animals, but they're not always the best caregivers of themselves.
Which makes it hard to reach out for help.
But they're self-reliant, so they want to do things themselves. They want to be the fixers and find the solutions.
He had become very detached. He had taken himself out of a lot of different organizations that he'd previously been involved with.
DeSutter says those signs or changes in behavior differ from person to person.
This is not a secret formula. This is not something that looks the same for everyone. It's something, we're just looking for something that has changed or multiple things that have changed.
She says if you're witnessing a change in behavior, the first step is to talk to your primary care doctor, who can then refer you to a specialist. But there are also other steps you can take to relieve the stress and burden caving in.
Just expand your life beyond agriculture. Go to find a book club or find a card club or have some friends that aren't related to agriculture, just so that you can have a break, because that's the uniqueness of farming. Is it's a career, but it's a lifestyle too.
We look at mental health and we look at stressors in agriculture as kind of that elephant in the room, really. And so let's talk about it, right? Let's try to remove that negative stigma that's associated with mental health in agriculture, and let's just start the conversation.
As the weight of challenges in agriculture gets heavier, DeSutter has one plea: to remember you matter.
I just need you to know that your worth is not measured by the markets. It's not measured by your farm. You are a valuable person. So I just urge you to reach out, talk to anyone that will listen.
My family went through a lot, and it still goes through a lot today. It's not something that just goes away when you figure out, how to live your life. We're continually grieving, even 6 years later. And so I want people to know that there's ways to get help, that there's resources out there, that there's options, that you don't have to go down this path.
Trying to push forward despite the heartache of such a tragic loss. Now reminding this family to always enjoy the little things in life.
With harvest and another USDA report just around the corner, it's never too late to start managing risk. We'll discuss it next. Plus, the ongoing problems created by this fire at a beef processing plant. It's coming up.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
It's home to the company that makes it, but Germany says it will ban the use of glyphosate from the end of 2023 and limit its use before then. Reuters reporting Bayer, which is based in Germany, disagreed with that decision, saying, quote, such a ban would ignore the overwhelming scientific assessments of competent authorities around the world that have determined for more than 40 years that glyphosate can be used safely, end quote. Glyphosate was developed by Monsanto. It's now off patent and marketed around the world by several other companies. Tommy Grisafi with Advanced Trading, our guest today. And Tommy, I want to ask you for some advice, I guess, for the farmers out there that are watching this and trying to manage the risk that's intrinsic in being a farmer. What do you see, or how do you have any advice for how we should be doing that this year?
Everyone's got to find out something that works for them. But when I meet with growers and when they hire us, the number one thing I ask them is what bushels they have. When we call them every few weeks, how is your crop progressing? Don't worry about the guy you know or a friend or cousin, a relative in Ohio who didn't get planted. And there are people who didn't get planted. But if you got the crop planted in a timely manner, that your risk is on that bushel. Looking around for other people, when people don't sell grain because they see someone else having a problem, and then you have this USDA crop report, and you say, wait a second, we're going to produce 14 billion bushels of corn. Although that's not as much as we thought we might produce a year ago, our demand's down. So the number one thing I think you could do is worry about your bushels. It's the only bushels you're going to make money on and be responsible for. And the best thing you could do is go on a crop tour in your own backyard and see what's growing out there.
Are there strategies for this time of year and basically the environment we're in for protecting that bushel that we are growing?
Well, a lot of growers were proactive. I mean, a lot of growers I work with have puts on, they have some sales. I think they'll look back and wish they sold more. There's no doubt about it. But we have our puts on for 19. A lot of growers put on D's 20 puts. So when D's 20 was up at $4.25, it was very affordable to throw a floor under there. So you could have the whole range from someone who's done nothing to someone who's hedged multiple years out. It's whatever that grower's comfortable with. And they have to have a banker or the money to do this. It's not just free to go out there and do this. So having cash is very important, and then using those bushels to cash flow at a proper time.
Have we learned anything from 2019? Maybe it's too early to ask that question.
Have we learned anything? There's a lot of noise out there, Clinton. There's a lot of noise, and the internet has changed how we perceive data. We trust people like you that what you're saying is true, but then you look at certain people you've never met on Twitter and they say something, there's no one to check to see if they were even telling the truth.
Yeah, lots of chatter, lots of noise, lots of things to filter through. At least we find that in our business as well. Appreciate it, Tommy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
Interested in spending a day with a trader? Call Tommy Grisafi at 800-664-4383. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joining us with a look at our root zone moisture map, and this is the long-term look at that top layer of soil and how much water is in there, and it does look like we've seen more moisture develop in the Midwest for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been pretty wet in much of the Midwest as it is, but some of the drier areas actually got a little bit of rain and a little bit of relief. Let's take a look. Some of the drier areas that we've seen some improvement include the southeast, but that's going to be completely different when we look at it next week with all of that moisture coming from Dorian. We've gotten a little bit less dry in parts of the southern plains as well, and we'll see some changes in that from Fernan. But we've also gotten more wet. More water has fallen in the nation's midsection. And interesting about the southeast is that the dryness has actually moved a little bit further to the north, but as I mentioned, that's all going to change by this time next week. Let's look at our map, and this is what we have going on. There's Dorian. That's really going to be the focus over the next couple of days as we move across the timeline there, and that slowly moves up through the Carolinas, at least the western part of the storm. awfully close. We're going to keep an eye on it and make sure that if you're in that area, you're watching your local affiliates there that will have the most up-to-date information. Then as we get through Thursday, we're going to be seeing high pressure in a lot of the Corn Belt, especially the central and eastern, so drier conditions there, but a low pressure starts to move into the upper Midwest and then into the western Great Lakes by later on in the day. As we head through the overnight, Dorian continues up into the mid-Atlantic. We'll start to see some spotty rain in parts of the Great Lakes and a few areas out in the west as well. And then as we get into our Friday afternoon, we'll see Dorian starting to move up into the northern parts of the mid-Atlantic, getting into the northeast. We'll see those effects there, and then we'll see maybe a couple of spotty showers in the southeast, but we see some rain starting to pick up in the west as well. All right, this is our precipitation estimate, and again, this is a different model than I was showing you before, but you can see that heavy rainfall, especially in the Carolinas. So we're looking at some really devastating impacts in the eastern parts of those states. Otherwise, we're not looking at a whole lot in the rest of the country. Temperature-wise, we are seeing some 90s across the southern plains there into the southeast, cooler 60s and 70s in the north central and northeastern states, but it does get warm though, even as you get up into parts of the northern plains. And then in the overnight hours we go, and we're going to see those low temperatures in the 50s and 60s up north, 70s and 80s down south. Tomorrow we'll see those temperatures mostly in the 70s across the northern tier states. Still pretty warm though in the south central United States. Quick check of the jet stream. You've got that ridge in the west, a bit of a trough in the east, and that ridge will build but then eventually kind of pull off to the east. You got another trough forming in the early part of next week there, but overall as we get into the middle of next week, a lot of that warmth really stays in the southern half of the country. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Kimberly, Idaho, hot with some showers and thunderstorms possible, especially later in the day with a high of 90 degrees. Michael, Illinois, sunny and pleasant, high of 79. And Cynthia, Mississippi, mostly sunny and hot with a high of 95.
Coming up, a fire at a beef processing plant in Kansas is continuing to be an issue. What it means for the beef industry and one company's bottom line. Next in Drovers.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Tyson says it's lowering its earnings forecast, citing short-term challenges. Company officials saying the challenges include commodity market volatility, enhanced food safety initiatives, and the fire at the beef processing plant in Holcomb, Kansas last month. As a result, the company now pegging earnings at between $5.30 and $5.70 per share. That's down from the $5.75 to $6.10 per share forecast. The company posted better than expected earnings nearly a month ago. The president and CEO of Tyson says their outlook for 2020 remains positive. And the fire at that beef plant is continuing to lead to volatility in the beef markets. Drovers report cash cattle prices remain at least $5 lower. Cattle feeders are frustrated the market is stuck in neutral so far. Fed cattle slaughter has managed to stay even with year-ago levels.
Over the past 2 weeks, fed cattle slaughter was more than 1% higher than last year, and packer profits are record high, exceeding $400 per head. To meet retail demand, packers have increased Saturday shifts, and so far that's helped feed yards remain current. But feedlot inventories are just as large as they were last year, and it is still not clear if packers will be able to run enough Saturday shifts to handle the available supply of cattle.
Heavy supplies are a concern this fall as the August 1st number of cattle on feed was 1% higher than last year and 15% higher than 2 years ago. Still ahead, more people heading back to college these days, and it's to learn about growing one kind of plant. Details next.
The IBM Watson Decision Platform for Agriculture, helping to feed a hungry world with the power of AI.
Hemp is part of the Farm Bill and it's generated a lot of interest. Now more ag colleges and universities are studying it. A hemp field day was recently held at the University of Kentucky's Spindletop Research Farm in Lexington, Kentucky. Several hemp variety trials are underway at the farm. More than 600 people took part in it, many interested in growing the crop for its fiber. others for medicinal purposes from the plant's natural oils. Potential growers could learn more about the crop, from its economics to hemp products, regulations, and pest management.
That are effective at keeping pests off plants, repelling insects, but they are not what we call conventional pesticides, which are have a bit more toxicity to them. One of the applications is, and we expect that there'll be more.
And if you want to know more about growing hemp, you'll have to check out our next Industrial Hemp College. Farm Journal hosting one later this month in Altoona, Iowa. That's near Des Moines. To register for the Tuesday, September 17th event, go to agweb.com/events. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out there in farm country.